we finally arrived at Holy Week. The journey that we began nearly 6 weeks ago with the sprinkling of ashes on our foreheads reaches its apex over the coming days. The time we've spent praying, fasting, and giving alms now leads us to stand confronting the greatest mystery of our faith, that God's own Son, who was without sin, would die the most painful, agonizing of deaths to save us all from sin. The stories we tell over this most holy of weeks are rich with imagery, emotion, and intrigue. From the triumphant kingly entry of Jesus into Jerusalem, to the breaking of bread with his apostles in the upper room, to the wrenching pain of betrayal in the scandal that was judgment and crucifixion. The retelling of these stories invites us to enter more deeply into their mystery, their contradiction, and their documentation of the work of God's plan of salvation. The high drama and reeling emotions in these stories draw from their direct connection to the mystery of the Incarnation we celebrate at Christmas, that Christ was fully human and fully divine. Both arcs of the salvation story are captured so beautifully in the message of the song, "Wood of the Cradle, Wood of the Cross," that Jesus was born in a manger, yet destined to die on a tree. The symbolism that both stories are interwoven couldn't be more apparent. And it's this very sense of humanness in the salvation story that speaks to us. The yearning of our hearts beckons us to see ourselves in these stories, in all of their splendor and in all of their agony. Perhaps we see ourselves as the apostles, who were confused by the Lord's request to find him a donkey for the entry into Jerusalem, or who were even more perplexed at his command of "do this in memory of me." We too struggle to do the will of God in our lives. We balk at the everyday inconveniences on our path, and we rail against moments of loss, pain, and confusion, never completely sure how God's plan is better than our own. Just as the apostles did, we struggle to comprehend the Lord's work of salvation in the world around us, and in our role in bringing it about. And we too wrestle with the tenets of our faith. Perhaps sometimes we feel like the religious authorities, who use their devotion to the law as a means of self-righteousness and ultimately scandal. Sometimes our own faith can be used as a weapon to assert moral superiority over others, rather than as a means to stand as witness by committing ourselves to radical acts of love and outpourings of grace on others. We can become jaded by ambition or by political alliances that tempt us to see those with whom we disagree as divorced from God's plan of salvation because of their perceived otherness. Perhaps sometimes we are Peter, so self-assured of our love and devotion to Christ, yet only to falter when given the opportunity to live out that call. And even sometimes we might identify with Judas, the seeming perfect image of a believer on the outside, but who is imprisoned by sin and who also doubts Jesus' mercy and forgiveness. All of these characters, and so many more, are stark, vivid reminders of the humanness found throughout the Holy Week story. Yet it's precisely the sense of humanity coursing through these verses that most fully and completely invites us to enter into the story ourselves. God's plan of salvation included the Incarnation, so he would step down from heaven and become one of us. He walked this earth, experiencing the same joys and sorrows as all of humanity, all so he could show oneness with us, his beloved. Through the characters that comprise the story of Holy Week, we realize that they, too, played a role in salvation's story, just like all of us are called to do. This story, so much a part of history and so central to our faith, renews itself again and again throughout the generations. The retelling and remembering of this story is an invitation to recall that by suffering and dying with Christ, we will also rise with Christ amid the glories of Easter Sunday.